So also, if while you're looking around the room, virtually, of course, if you notice some folks didn't make it back and they're in your chapter, you can shoot them a quick text message. You can also let them know that the weird sound that happens, like if you join or leave, isn't there, so it's not awkward if they join later. I know that makes a lot of people anxious. I know it makes me anxious if I'm running late, so that should take that away from you. But yeah, so let's get started. So this is our chapter wellness workshop. It's going to be analyzing and diving a little bit deep into what a chapter wellness event looks like and give you some ideas and some input on how you can utilize this resource. So it's an event to help improve the sustainability of your chapters. So what is a chapter wellness event? So chapter wellness can go by many different titles, but the main purpose is to check in with your chapter to see what is working, what isn't, and get solutions and ideas on how to move forward. It creates a space for the chapter to share how they feel about everything that's currently going on. So when should this occur? Ideally, this would take place at the midpoint of the semester. This allows for position holders to have some time to do their position and then also get some feedback on how folks think that they are doing. You want to leave time for major events to have taken place, so feedback can be given on how it actually went. What are the goals? So having an after action review of some of your major semester events, such as recruitment, retreat, and some other big events, is a really good goal to have. And just for clarification, an after action review is like 4 big questions of how did we do, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we do to prepare better for the future. So this is something that you can do with the chapter as a whole for these larger events. And then also after the chapter wellness event, you can do it with the person that hosted the chapter wellness event and the exec board, just so that they're able to really dive deep themselves and improve that process over time. And then next, a goal you can have is review how the chapter as a whole is doing with the pillars of OPA, not faux, but of, I guess, still switcheroo there. And just a reminder, the pillars: service, leadership, and friendship. Next, you can review how members of the exec board are doing as a collective and individually. That one can be a little scary for folks, but feedback is good as long as it's provided with solutions and not just insults. Next is get some input on the chapter morale, and then you can use this as a mid-semester reset as well. Lastly, have space for some open discussion. You want to make sure that people feel like they can talk to exec board, they can talk as a chapter and say what their feelings are, all of those things. So now let's talk a little bit about getting started. So here are the steps needed to actually plan a successful chapter wellness event so it can be utilized to its full capacity. So what to do? Pick a date. This is really important. So it's easiest if you either make this during a chapter meeting or have a shortened chapter where this is right after. This is going to be a place where everyone is free because it's your chapter meeting. They should be free. It should be on their calendar, and it creates one less extra commitment that people have to do. Having it during your chapter has been really, really successful for a lot of folks, just so it replaces a chapter and you can really say like you're prioritizing your chapter's wellness, which is a part of mental health. If your chapter is not well, you're not really making sure that everyone's having the great experience. So it's something that you should prioritize. You can also have a shortened chapter. Sometimes the middle point of your semester could be right after retreat, and it could just be like a really, really big turnaround time. So if you need to have like really important things said, just shorten it to make sure that people get a highlight reel of the important things they need to know. Next, after recruitment, you should put out a survey to see how folks think it went. So you should do this before the event so that it's like really fresh on people's minds. So right after recruitment, it's really good just to send it out. You can even have people do it during the chapter right after, and just build some time in. So then they're able to say, oh yeah, like this night went well, this night didn't go well. Here's what some of the potential new members actually told me their experience was. anything like that, you want to make sure that you find that out then and there. So then by the time that you get to chapter wellness, people are like, well, I think it was great. I have no idea. I can't really remember. You have some record of what people were feeling. Next, 2 weeks before the event, you want to put out a chapter climate survey. So this is going to help with the flow of the event because it's going to give you some graphics that you can use to share how chapter is feeling. A really big one to ask is like, what's your overall experience right now on a scale of 1 to 10? That's a really good graphic to see because you can really map out and see how is everybody's version and experience of chapter going right now. It's great if everyone's on the higher scale, but if they're not, it's a really good reality check of where you need to grow and it needs to be changed. Next, the big day. We'll talk a little bit more about that later of what that looks like. I'll actually walk you through the flow of it so you have a little bit of background with that. And then lastly, after the event, whoever is hosting the chapter wellness, they'll need to meet with the exec board to kind of go over the details of what was said when they were not in the room. And I'll explain all of these things a little bit more. Disclaimer, you don't want someone from exec board to be over the event. This can be a position or someone who volunteers. It's easy if it's the position in your chapter. You can just call them a chapter wellness chair, or if you just have somebody that wants to volunteer for that semester to host the event, that's perfectly fine. But you want to make sure that there are some spaces of and being anonymous, there we go, when the exec board is not in the room, so people are actually able to share how they're feeling or their experience, because that kind of space is really important. It can be healing for some folks. All right, let's dive deeper. So picking a date. You're going to look at the midpoint of your semester, try to pick a date closest so that officers have the opportunity to fully know and make efforts in their roles. You don't want to be too early because if they haven't even had the opportunity to do their position, people can't really give any honest feedback because they haven't done anything. If you are able to have it after a retreat, you have even more things to chat about, which is great. And then once the date is picked, make sure it's aligned with the exec board and find a place to have it and start thinking about the details. The closest it is to what your chapter meeting is, the better. So if it's in the same room as your chapter, the same time, the same flow, everything like that, it just makes it feel more homey and more like what they're used to. So it doesn't seem like a big affair. And then fun fact, once it's picked, it should be a requirement for people to attend. It's about improving your chapter, so everybody should be interested and everybody should have an input, especially if there's people who are usually complaining about chapter and how it goes, anything like that. This is a really good way in encouraging them to voice their opinions. This is what this event is for. If they have better ideas, tell them to come and bring them because everybody should hear them. So I mentioned a recruitment feedback survey. You might be wondering what this is. So recruitment is a really big component of every semester for every chapter. It's a great idea to gauge how members felt it went. It allows for the officer to receive feedback and ideas that they can pass on to the next officer. So some questions to ask. What was your overall recruitment experience? This is a really good one to have kind of a rate thing of like a rate your scale 1 to 10. It's a really good graphic to include at Chapter Wellness. So then you can actually see everything and you can see like where's the scale falling. And it's also a really good question to have open-ended partnered with it. So people can share a little bit of extra details. This is a really good space for that. Another one is, how did you feel about the scheduling of recruitments? So allow them to give feedback on the dates that it happened, the times, the location. They might have a better suggestion of maybe the next time we have recruitment, we do a week later because it would be after Panhellenic recruitment and we might be able to get the people that didn't go through Panhell. That's a wonderful suggestion. And so if people have that, that's something that you want to hear. The times, it's really important what time you schedule recruitment, especially thinking through freshman schedules. So maybe you have someone that gives a suggestion that's a resident assistant and they can say, I had a lot of residents interested. They couldn't make the time. I think next year, if it's an hour earlier, it would be even better. Stuff like that is really important to gauge and to know. And if you're never getting that feedback, you'll never know, especially if they don't run for that position the next time. So another question to ask is, how did you feel about the service project? So you should be doing a service project at your recruitment. We are a service sorority, really important. So it's really good to figure out what service projects people like. Some projects are really good for one-on-one things to do. Some are really great for group activities and can allow for a conversation. So there's a really good note to have when you're trying to get feedback on things. If people felt like it was really hard to know who the PNM was during that service project, that's something great to know. Maybe it's not perfect for recruitment. Another question, how did you feel about the outfit requirements? Every chapter is different, the way that they do outfits. I know some chapters, they say you need to wear this. They have examples of what to wear, or people just give guidelines. It varies, but allowing people to have some feedback on that is also really important because it's something that they're being required to do. The next question, how did you feel about the preparation? So going into recruitment, did they feel like they knew exactly what was happening? If they had a question, they knew who to go to, anything like that. Did they feel prepared to be able to bring someone else into their chapter? Really important question. And then lastly, how did you feel about the execution? Nobody is perfect. It is really important to get feedback on what could have been done differently and how it could have been improved. So this is a great question just to find out how they felt the person running recruitment did, and also how did the exec board do in supporting the person that was running recruitment. Also really important. So these are just a few questions, and then they can be tailored however you see fit. And then after each of these, it's a really great idea to get some rates on a scale of 1 to 10 and ask for tangible solutions. I'm really big on asking for solutions because if you're just getting feedback and nothing can come of it, it's almost a waste of feedback. I also mentioned a chapter climate survey. So this should go out 2 weeks before chapter wellness. You should just prepare a survey that people can fill out up until the event. And it's just getting anonymous feedback from people on how they think everything is going. So topics to uncover include service, the exec board as a whole and individually, sisterhood components, the overall chapter morale, leadership opportunities. It's one of our pillars. How are you guys doing in uplifting that? And diversity and inclusion. It's really important that people feel included and that they feel represented in their culture and who is in the organization, everything in between. All right, the big event. So we're going to dive a little deeper into what the event can look like, and also I'm going to provide you some examples so it's easier to implement yourself. So the chapter wellness event, here are some great tips. I love all of these. I definitely suggest them. So number one, share the survey responses from the recruitment and climate survey. It's a great way for people to feel comfortable talking. So it's almost like somebody went first. When you're able to pull up on the screen and say, we asked this question from the survey. Here's what a lot of people thought. Let's build off of that. So it's almost like somebody went first, which is awesome. Number two, create groups for people to talk about topics and then share back. It removes that pressure of being the one person to share a concern. So if you build in some time for people to talk as a group and share what they thought about that question, then they report back as a group, makes it feel more welcoming. Number three, time everything. Otherwise, it goes into a frenzy. You should have a time for people to talk as a group, a time for people to say pros, a time for people to say grows, everything. So then it doesn't get too long and people aren't just going over and over and over or saying the same thing. Number four, have designated time for exec board members to not be in the room. You want honest feedback so folks can grow. And then speaking of grow, number five talks about how I mentioned using the framework of pros, grows, and proposals. All of these will facilitate a kind of a community of learning and growing rather than feeling like we're tearing each other down. Next, have food or snacks, incentives, or something else that will make folks excited to come. And then lastly, don't leave the space without tangible ideas. If people have a grievance, make sure they accompany it with a proposal. If they don't have one, you can also just open up the floor for ideas. If one person is thinking something, most likely someone else is too. So Some ground rules. This is just an example. I think whenever you go into like a voting process, an event where people are giving feedback, anything like a town hall, anything like that, you should have some ground rules. Number one, be respectful of your sisters and their points. Number two, hand raising is awesome. Number three, if a point has already been brought up, try not to repeat it. Number four, don't be afraid to say something. If you have a question, please ask. Number five, what's said here stays here, but what's learned here leaves here. Number six, be objective. So there is a way to frame chapter wellness. So it's just revolving around the big buckets of work that we do in the pillars. So it's easiest if you use these to just dive into things, and it's a great way to start. A great way to start is to share what the chapter's overall experience is, then proceed forward into the buckets. And I'll show you what those questions can look like within the buckets. So service. So here's an example of questions for these. So the first one is, what has been the overall experience with our projects? Second one, how do you feel about the types of service that are available? And then you can break this down looking at on-campus versus off-campus service, hands-on service versus on your own time. And now you can take this even further with saying like virtual opportunities, especially coming out of the pandemic. It's a really good way to have that conversation about switching more to hands-on service and getting that on people's radar rather than virtual service. I know that's been a really difficult transition for a lot of chapters. So making that a part of the conversation is really important. Next is the times for service. Everyone has class at different times. Everyone has different outside lives, whether that includes work, being a part of another organization, anything in between. So having service times that works for everyone can be really difficult. But if the majority of people are not able to attend something, that's probably something that should be raised. The next one is pre-existing versus new projects. So are people really interested in trying to branch out, form relationships with different organizations, or do they really like that you stick to having an annual project and you do that? So it's really good to just have this kind of feedback so then you can improve and adjust your service opportunities so people are excited about the service that they do. The next one is, how can we help make service more accessible to those with busy schedules? Like I said earlier, everyone has a different schedule, a different life, and a different journey that they're on to complete their degree. And so it's really important to think about, is service actually accessible for everybody that's in your chapter? If it's not, you got to rework some things and get some ideas for how to make it more accessible. Lastly, what types of service would you like to see added to OFIA? So this is really good for the service director if maybe they're struggling still to find a project for one of the areas of service, and they're just like really needing help and it's just not working the way, or maybe there was an issue with the partner that you're working with or the organization. This is a really good idea for them, and it can add to creating a little list of previous service projects or service project ideas that they can then pass down to every service director. So then they come with a preset of ideas, including the ones that Nationals provides. They just have a list that they can just choose from. It makes their position easier over time. Friendship. So, do sisters feel included with our chapter? This is a really, really good question. And it talks about diversity and inclusion within this question. The next one is, how can we foster friendships better in our chapter? And what would y'all like to see? So it can be very difficult to walk the line with friendships sometimes, because some people feel, everyone doesn't have to be friends. We just have to respect each other. But what does that look like realistically in your chapter? And how does that cultivate a really good community within your chapter? And so posing this question to the members really makes them reflect on this and think about, well, actually, how can we foster friendships? What would we like to see? And it puts the work almost on them. The next question is, how can we continue to foster sisterhood through the semester? And this can be thinking about new actives, new members, and people returning from LOA. What does it look like to include them and make sure that they are always included throughout the semester? It can be really scary with any of these phases of your membership, trying to be peeking your way through the membership bubble and being a part of active chapter. And so what are you doing to continuously foster that sisterhood? The next one is, how do we keep sisters involved to promote sisters staying in OFA until graduation? A lot of people have issues with people going early alum or just alum, people going LOA. How are you making sure people are wanting to be involved, or even just people that just kind of disappear off the face of the earth? They happen to every chapter. It happens once in a blue moon, but when that happens, why is it happening? And how can you make sure it doesn't happen again? The next one is, how are we doing with our diversity? Are we being culturally competent and aware? So in the way that you're promoting for recruitment, think about that. Is it diverse? Is it culturally competent? What kind of group are you actually trying to bring in with the way that you're promoting things? Even your presence on campus, do people know who you are? And if they do, what are they thinking? Anything like that, just like, how are you guys doing internally, externally, really thinking about how is your chapter doing in regards to diversity and being culturally competent and aware. So a subgroup of our lovely friendship category is the new member experience. So how has the new member process been going from the eyes of chapter? So when you're the membership director, I feel like sometimes you can be in a bubble of like, new member, love, wonderful, which is awesome. But as the active chapter, how are they viewing that experience? Are they actually interacting with the new members at all, or are they not and they're just only getting updates from you? For the events that they've had to attend, like recruitment, bid day, pinning, the weekly meetings, anything like that, how do they view that happening from their perspective? And then how has it been for their participation in chapter? And then how are they doing in their quizzes? Are they actually like invested in this chapter and like feel like they belong and all they need to do is complete these requirements and they're just right in? Or do they feel siloed and they don't really feel included in the friendship with active chapter? And then lastly, new and ongoing traditions at retreat. Retreat's a really big experience for actives and for new members. So what's happening at retreat to make them feel welcome and excited and everything in between? If there isn't really anything happening at retreat and maybe it's kind of boring, it's okay. You just got to revamp it and make it exciting and fun, and you can get ideas at this event. Our last bucket is leadership. I think this is the one that people get really scared about because it's a personal reflection, but it's also a reflection on how are the leaders doing that are on exec board. So with leadership, how can we do better to support the leaders stepping into positions? This is a really good question because it's really going to analyze, are people excited to be a part of exec board or to hold an officer position? Or are they scared? Do they feel like they have a target on their back? Do they not feel like they're prepared to ever be in a leadership position? What is that culture around leadership in your chapter? So how can you better support them as new actives? And then for people who are new to exec, what does that transition look like to being on exec? What's that expectation? Why are people excited or not excited to be a part of that? And then new actives, when they're trying to integrate into active chapter, are they looking forward to being into a position or are they not? They're just like, I'm here for the journey. I just want to do service. And why do they feel that way? The next question is, how do you feel about the number of positions that we have? I know sometimes it can be very exciting to have a ton of officers and positions, but is it sustainable? Does it actually make sense for your chapter to have 20 positions and you only have 30 people in your chapter? Or even to have 15 positions and you only have 15 people in your chapter? It can be a lot for every person to hold a position every semester they are a part of the organization. So what does it look like to kind of think about how many positions should we really have? And then also on the flip side, do you feel like any are missing? And then are there still enough opportunities for leadership? If you're reducing the amount of positions you have, do people still feel like they're growing their leadership and the organization without even having a position? Next are leadership events, which kind of ties. So, how are you doing in those? Whether you have like a leadership chair, or if you have just events that you do annually, or a connection on campus where you're able to do some leadership events, all of those connect. So, what does that look like, and how can you improve that? So, exec board. This is where people get a little scared, but it's not scared. It's an awesome time for feedback, which is so great. So, exec board is going to be a subcategory of leadership. So, you're going to be asking the questions of, do you feel that exec as a whole is approachable? This is a very good question, because if all of your active chapter is saying that they don't feel comfortable coming to you, that means that you're not representing your active chapter the right way. The next question, do you feel that exec is communicating well with chapter? This ties into transparency. If your chapter really feels like they have no idea what you do at all, that's a problem. They should know what your role is. They should know how to get in contact with you. They should know what's happening in your exec board meetings, everything in between. Like if you don't have exec board meeting minutes that you're able to share out with chapter, probably should start that. Little things like that that can be done to improve transparency and make them feel like you're approachable and that you're communicating well with them is all part of the goal. And then also ask the question of like, what's exec doing well? What could they improve? That's where the grows come into place with a tangible solution. The next one is there anything that you would like to see from exec going forward? Whether that's needing more support, whether it's having some new changes that you put into play, or it's bringing up some past things that old exec boards used to do that you think your chapter could really benefit from right now. A tip for this is that for this section, you can also have officers leave for specific positions to get some feedback for them. This can be done in groups with designated times to discuss pros and grows for each position. So, for example, you can have the president and vice president leave the space, and then you set a timer for 5 minutes for people to say pros on each position. And then you can set another timer for 5 minutes for people to say grows for each position. So it allows for each officer to get designated feedback on how they're doing in their role. It can be really stressful when you're in an exec board position. You don't actually know if people like what you're doing because they're just trying to say that they love what you're doing because they're happy you're in the role, which is great. But everybody needs feedback. Everyone needs to be able to grow as a leader, and making sure that people can get that is really good. And it's being a good sister to them. So you have the event, chapter wellness is over. Now what? You need to consolidate the notes from the event. People are going to say a lot of suggestions, a lot of notes. You want to make sure people hear them. And then you want to share the notes with exec board. And you make sure it's anonymous so people don't feel like they'll have a target on their back for speaking their mind. Answer any questions that they might have since they weren't in the room for some of the portions. And then at the end of the semester, you want to do a chapter checkup, which is like a quick 30-minute check-in to see if folks think improvements were made in all areas. This is usually done at your last meeting where it's like fun, exciting, and reflective, and like memories, and people are sad, and seniors are glad. It's like a really good way to round it up of saying, let's check up, let's see how we're doing, and then let's move forward. Okay, so chapter wellness is critical. So if you're continuously evolving your chapter around the current needs, there never becomes a reason to scrap everything and build from scratch. Being transparent, honest, and adaptive leadership is key. It's going to make sure that your chapter is sustainable and you're able to make changes and not feel like you're completely messing up the structure of your whole organization. Chapter wellness is a really good idea to have once a semester, or if you feel like it's a little too stacked for you, you can start with once a year and then build up from there, especially depending on your leadership voting process. If you vote once a year, it might be easier to do once a year. So if you need any specific help with that, you can reach out to me and I can help you plan one. I love to plan events. But yeah, that was my last slide. And then does anybody have any questions?
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
If you were to only do this once a year, like you said, would you do this like in the middle of the entire year? So like at the end of the first semester, or would you still recommend doing it in the middle of one semester?
Yeah, so if you choose to do a big one once a year, then I would do it at the end of the first semester. And then you can do like a chapter kickoff at the beginning of the semester where you make them really excited to come and be a part of chapter and to give them like a glimpse of what's going to be happening. That'll be really fun. And then just doing the chapter checkup at the very end of the academic year would be really good. So then you have 3 touch points still.
Thank you.
Of course, really good question. Thanks for asking. Anybody else have a question? If you don't want to unmute, you can put it in the chat and I'll say it for you. So it's less stressful. Awesome. Well, I feel like I've done the awkward wait for a great time. And so, as you're thinking through this, if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to me. I'm planning to also make a guide for this, so it's a little bit easier. I'm going to also include this presentation, but also just in written format. And if you need help planning one for your chapter, you can reach out to me and I can help you either via email or you can sign up for my office hours with the Tea Time with Taylor. But yeah. Do I have a question? I'm going to read the question out loud but not say who it's from. So the question is, for small chapters where the majority of actives are on exec board, how would you recommend facilitating conversation between actives that are not on exec? And then I said, sorry, I took too long for typing, which is totally fine. So for members that aren't on exec, I would encourage one of them to actually facilitate this. So then they're able to step into a leadership role. And then for the folks that aren't on exec, I think it's great when the exec board leaders leave the room that they have that space to really share how they're feeling with how the people on exec are doing. So I think having space for them to share as a collective of not being on exec and then as a collective with everyone on exec is going to be really important. So then they're able to uplift how they're feeling and not feel like they're being overpowered with the amount of numbers that are in the room. So I think taking that step will be really important. And then if you need individual help, you can reach out to me because I can also help with that too. But great question. Thank you. Great. All right. And I think the next session starts at 2:15.
Yeah, you're right. It starts at 2:15. So, and we don't have everyone here for that session. So, I do think we should take like, a 5-ish minute breather. And then I'm going to stay here. But if you guys need a bio break or whatever, let's do that.
Awesome. I'll set up a lovely timer because that's how I roll.
Thank you. Thank you.